Byrds, and on January 16th, he and other members of the group were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. This is his latest album, or I guess it's appropriate to say CD these days. It's back from Rio, but at least you had the good grace to make it feel like an album a little bit, in that it opens up and we get to see you in miniature standing on stage.
That's actually a special promotional copy. The regular one is a plastic jewel box, and it doesn't do that.
What would your assessment be of the historical significance of the Byrds? I mean, obviously songs like Mr. Tambourine Man and Turn, Turn, Turn and 8 Miles High are rock or folk rock classics.
Yeah.
But in terms of the influence on what followed, that's where I think the real importance of the Byrds lies. Would you agree with that?
Well, that's a serious question for something that's kind of a lighthearted thing in my book, because we started out as folkies and we got inspired by the Beatles, you know, and we just wanted to record rock and roll. And we tried to do that in the studio, and because of our folk background, it came out folk rock. I mean, we couldn't help it. We didn't try to invent something, and we weren't thinking about influencing anybody. We were just trying to make rock and roll happen.
So you literally saw the Beatles and said,
yeah,
this is what's happening, this is fun.
Yeah, we went to the movie A Hard Day's Night, and we loved it. And we copied down all the instruments. I noticed that George Harrison was playing a Rickenbacker 12-string guitar, and I was playing an acoustic 12 with a pickup in it, and it didn't quite sound the same. So the next day I went out to the music store and got a Rickenbacker, and it really made a big difference in the sound.
And that opening of Mr. Tambourine Man is one of the classic guitar riffs in rock history.
It's like a little Bach thing that I've been listening to a lot of Bach, so that's where I got the idea for that.
Where'd the name The Byrds come from?
We were playing around with different names. We had the name The Jet Set, and nobody quite liked that. And we were at dinner with our manager. It was Thanksgiving. And he was looking at the turkey, and he said, what about the Byrds? And we said, well, that's good, except that it's a slang for girls in England. And we didn't want any kind of confusion to be in that area. So he said, well, what if you change the spelling, maybe B-U-R-D-S? And I said, oh, I don't like that. How about B-Y-R-D-S? And so we settled on that.
Yeah, that was back at a time when most American teenagers knew that Byrds was slang for girls, because those fan magazines, those Beatle fan magazines, always included a glossary of hip Beatles terms.
That's
like
right.
Something that was really, don't say boss anymore, or say it was a blast, say it was gear, or say it was fab, or call your girlfriend a bird.
A bird, right, yeah. So we didn't want to be the B-I-R-D-S because we didn't want to be the girls. Yeah. Although today that would probably be a good name for a band.
How important was it to you, commercially, and maybe more so psychologically, that Dylan stepped right up and gave his stamp of approval to you guys?
I think psychologically it was of tremendous value, and commercially it helped too. He was looked up to in the folk medium, but he wasn't yet accepted as a pop artist. And for him to come up and the king of folk to say, these guys are okay, was really a big boost. I think it was, yeah.
You appeared, and so did David Crosby, at a Roy Orbison tribute. I'm not sure how long ago, within the year, I guess. And Dylan walks out on stage in the middle of Mr. Tambourine Man.
That was something.
And I may be reading into this, but when he came out there, it affected you. You seemed you gave way to him, and
well, he wrote the song, and he's the king of folk, you know, of course you do. We had prearranged that we were going to do the song together. He called me, and I talked to him about it, but we didn't do it the way we talked about. He was supposed to come out on my mic and sing, and we were going to do the verse that we did on the record, which was, take me for a trip on your magic swirling ship. Well, we started the song, and I looked around, and there's no Dylan, so I went into another verse, and then I still looked around, and Bob wasn't there yet. And I went into the verse that we were supposed to do together, and halfway through that, he came out, and you can feel the audience started cheering and standing up at that point, and everybody felt the excitement of the electricity of Bob being out there with us, and then we sang it together, and it was really pretty neat.
When you do a Dylan song, obviously Mr. Tambourine Man was a tremendous success. When you do a song like My Back Pages, are you quivering, waiting for the response? Say, we think it's good, but this guy's Bob Dylan. It's his song.
I didn't really worry about it. Funny story on how the song got recorded. It was after we'd let our manager go, Jim Dixon, and he and I were both driving up Laurel Canyon in our cars, and he pulled up next to me and rolled down his window and said, you know, wanted to talk to me. And I rolled down my window, and he said, you guys ought to record my back pages. And I'd never thought of it. And so I went home, I got out the Dylan record, and I listened to it, and I worked up the arrangement, and we went into the studio that week and cut it. I wasn't nervous about it. I didn't think one way or the other about whether it would be a hit or not. In fact, a lot of our energy wasn't directed toward, is this going to be a hit? We were just trying to do good music, and we really didn't concentrate on commercial stuff, which is why we did so much stuff that wasn't commercial. You know?
Interesting thing about the Byrds, because of the time that you hit it big, you kind of straddle the rock eras and the rock sensibilities. Obviously, you're 100% certified by the genuine rock and roll people. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, it was 1965, 66. Mm-hmm. You had hit records played on AM radio in the top 40. That meant you were on Hullabaloo and Shindig and Where the Action Is, right?
That's right, and the Ed Sullivan Show, for that matter, yeah.
What was that like?
It was really exciting. I remember the Ed Sullivan Show, especially. Crosby almost got it kicked off. He was like, Crosby's very, you know, he's a very staunch guy, and he stands up for what he believes in. And Ed's son-in-law was the producer of the show, and Turn, Turn, Turn was a song. And it runs about 3 minutes, and Ed's son-in-law listened to it with a stopwatch, and he said, well, that's nice, fellas, but we're going to have to cut out about a minute of it. And Crosby hit the ceiling. He said, this is our art. This is our livelihood. We don't cut out time for people, and we're not going to do it. And the guy said, you're out of here. You know, forget it. You're off the show. And our manager came out and begged and pleaded and said, please, please let him back on, and they did. And, you know, but...
and let you play it in its entirety?
Let us play it, yeah, the whole thing.
Take me for a trip above the end. There ain't no place I'm going to.
Turn, Turn, Turn was a song that took an unbelievable number of takes to get right, and it became a classic. Why was it so hard? Because it seems like a fairly simple song without a complex arrangement.
We didn't use click tracks back then, you know. Now you do. You use a click track and you get the beat right and the tempo right. The feel was just not right. We couldn't get the feel. You know, we played with it. We would try to get the band track down, and now it wasn't quite right, and we did it again. And there would be a lot of errors. It just didn't come together until about 70 or 80 takes. I don't remember exactly how many.
You want to put this thing to use?
Sure. Play a little bit of it. David Crosby and I came up with this riff here. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to reap, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh, a time to weep. To everything, turn, turn.
Said at one time that the Byrds were his favorite American band. How well did you know him or any of the other Beatles?
The Beatles and the Byrds got to know each other right after we went to England the first time, and then when they came over to the States, they would send a limo down and pick us up and take us up to their mansion in Bel Air. And we played pool and sat around and played guitars together and compared notes. I found out that George Harrison and I learned how to play the same lick on the guitar at the same time. It's like a... There's a thing from the backside of Gene Vincent's record called Woman Love. There's a backside of Bebop-A-Lula. And John Lennon and I talked about Bebop-A-Lula, and he said that was his favorite record. And I said, yeah, I love that record. And we got to know each other pretty well. We'd see each other in England or in California. And we sent things back and forth to each other, little songs. And George Harrison listened to this riff on The Bells of Rimney. Song that goes, if I needed someone to love, and he sent it over with Derek Taylor, sorry, and he said, give this to McGuinn and tell him that I wrote this based on Bells of Rimney. So we used to kind of converse back and forth across the water.
you don't take yourself too seriously, and obviously that's a good thing. But I'll say it for you. Some of it may have just been circumstance, but at the time that you guys came to prominence in the mid-'60s, the shift is going from singles to albums. For example, you guys had only 6 or 7 songs that were ever in the top 40 singles-wise, but you were selling albums like crazy.
Yeah.
And whether it was an accident or whatever, folk rock got the push from songs like Turn, Turn, Turn and Mr. Tambourine Man. And then later when Graham Parsons joined the group and Sweetheart of the Rodeo was so successful, a lot of people said that's the time when people really, in massive numbers, became enamored of country rock.
That did help country rock to have the Byrds go into it like that. We were just trying to change musical direction so we wouldn't get locked in a box, because the press has a way of saying, well, this is folk rock, and that's what these guys do. And we wanted to pop around and maybe, you know, be sort of evasive, serpentine, you know, get into different areas of music. And that's why we did go into country and have a little jazz influence with 8 Miles High, a little raga influence with Y, the backside of 8 Miles High. Kept trying to change the direction.
Was 8 Miles High a drug song in any way?
I don't know. You just had David Crosby on a while at some time, and I don't know what he says. He and I and Chris Hillman and Gene Clark wrote the song. And what I was thinking of was an airplane ride back from England. We had just come from a really horrendous tour of England where the press crucified us because we were, without our knowledge, portrayed as America's answer to the Beatles. The promoter did this because it sold more tickets. And so when the press saw us over there, they were out to get us. And they did. And they said that we were terrible. And we came back to the States feeling, wow, you know, that was rough. And we wrote 8 Miles High about the airplane ride. About 8 Miles High was about the altitude of the plane. And when you touch down, you'll find that it's stranger than known. Signs in the streets that say where you're going. That's like the street signs in London are funny. They're not like the ones in America where you can look at them on the corner and see where you're going. You have to look up in the, like the 3rd floor of a building, and there'll be like this little plaque taped up there, and, or, you know, nailed up there, and maybe it's fallen off or it's been there for so long that you can't read it. So signs in the streets that say where you're going are somewhere just being their own. Rain Grey Town, known for its sound in places small faces unbound. It's about London. It's about the trip over there.
8 miles high their own.
It doesn't seem, because it isn't as acidy sounding, it doesn't seem like a psychedelic rock song, but it's fair to say that it paved the way, right?
I don't know. People read that into it. There was a tip sheet for radio that said it was, and a lot of stations stopped playing it at the time. The instrumental break was a tribute to John Coltrane. We'd been listening to a lot of Coltrane records and loved him so much that when we got back, I was trying to emulate him on my Electric 12 and get some of those like valve closing sounds, you know. I love that stuff. Still do.
Well, when you pay such obvious tribute to a Coltrane, and you say that, hey, we saw the Beatles, they knocked this out, we went in that direction, acknowledge what Dylan meant to you. There seems to be some of the wide-eyed kid in you still, even as a veteran.
Oh, sure. I'm grateful to rock and roll that I've never grown up, and I still have a lot of awe for what's going on in the world, and it feels good. When I was growing up in Chicago, listening to Elvis Presley on my transistor radio, I never dreamed I'd be in the same Hall of Fame that he is, and thank the Lord for it.
And make time to every purpose under heaven. Will you crawl through this castle like the king of the hill?
Petty appears, at least briefly, on your present album, and Elvis Costello contributes too, doesn't he?
Right, right. Tom and I wrote the song, the lead song, King of the Hill, together on a tour, and he sang on that. And he also sang on a song about the environment called The Trees Are All Gone. And Elvis wrote a song for me. It's called You Bowed Down. And he happened to be in L.A. when I was recording it, and he came to the studio and sang background on mine.
You bow down, you bow down.
Is there any truth to the notion that Dennis Hopper's character, an Easy Rider, was fashioned in part after David Crosby, then your partner with the Byrds?
Peter Fonda told me that he was basing his character on me, and Hopper was basing his character on Crosby. Yeah, he told me that.
A couple of your songs are on the soundtrack of the movie, right?
Yeah, we used, let's see, we used a couple of songs, yeah. I wrote one for it called The Ballad of Easy Rider, which is like... River flows to the sea. Wherever that river goes, that's where I want to be. Flow, river, flow. Let your waters wash down. Take me from this road to some other town. Just like that.
Dylan contributed a couple of lines.
He did.
Didn't want the credit.
Yeah, the story on that is that Peter Fonda brought the film to New York and showed it to Dylan and asked him to write a song for it. And Bob scribbled down, the river flows, it flows to the sea, and wherever that river goes, that's where I want to be, and handed it to Fonda and said, here, give this to McGuinn. So he went back to California and gave it to me, and I finished up the song.
Now, Fonda's character was based on you, and Hopper's was based on Crosby. What threads of truth do you see, and where do you see this is an exaggeration or something else?
Well, the basic thing that Fonda was trying to do was, I had this positive attitude where I used to go around saying, I trust everything will work out all right. And at that time, Crosby was a little bit on the negative side. Oh, man, this is never going to work, you know, it's not, we can't do that. And so that was the two characters, the dichotomy of positive and negative.
The Byrds are one of rock and roll's historic groups, and that was recognized when they were inducted into the Hall of Fame on January the 16th. We thank Roger McGuinn for stopping by, and this is his latest solo effort, with a lot of help from his friends, though, back from Rio. We got to get out of here. See you later.